Hello, and welcome back, you lovely degenerates. Anyway, today we're going to be reading Ben Drowned. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, I need your help with this. This is not copy pasta. This is a long read, but I feel like my safety or well-being could very well depend on this. This is a video game related, specifically Majora's Mask, and this is the creepiest stuff that has ever happened to me in my entire life. Having said that, I recently moved into my dorm, starting as a sophomore in college, and a friend of mine gave me his old Nintendo 64 to play. I was stoked, to say the least. I could finally play all those old games of my youth that I hadn't touched in at least a decade. His Nintendo 64 came with one yellow controller and a rather shoddy copy of Super Smash Bros. While beggars can't be choosers, needless to say, it didn't take long until I became bored of beating level 9 CPUs. That weekend, I decided to drive around a few neighborhoods about 20 minutes or so off campus, hitting up the local garage sales, hoping to score on some good deals from ignorant parents. I ended up picking up a copy of Pokemon Stadium, GoldenEye, frick yeah, F-Zero, and two other controllers for $2. Satisfied, I began to drive out of the neighborhood. Then one last house caught my attention. I still have no idea why it did. There were no cars there, and only one table was set up with random junk on it. But something sort of drew me there. I usually trust my gut on these things, so I got out of the car and I was greeted by an old man. His outward appearance was, for lack of a better word, displeasing. It was odd. If you asked me to tell you why, I thought he was displeasing. I couldn't really pinpoint anything. There was just something about him that put me on edge. I can't explain it. All I can tell you is that if it wasn't in the middle of the afternoon and there were other people within shouting distance, I would not have even thought of approaching this man. He flashed a crooked smile at me and asked what I was looking for, and I immediately noticed that he must be blind in one of his eyes, his right eye that had glazed over look about it. I forced myself to look to his left eye instead, trying not to offend. I asked him if he had any old video games. I was already wondering how I could politely excuse myself for this situation when he would tell me that he had no idea what a video game was, but to my surprise he had a few ones in an old box. He assured me he'd be back in a jiffy, and he returned to head back into the garage. As I watched him hobble away, I couldn't help but notice that he was selling on his table. Littered across the table were rather peculiar paintings, various artworks that looked like ink blots that a psychiatrist might show you. Curious, I looked through them. It was obvious why no one was visiting this guy's garage sale. These weren't exactly aesthetically pleasing. As I came to the last one, for some reason it almost looked like Majora's Mask. The same heart-shaped body with little spikes protruding outward. Initially, I just thought that since I was secretly hoping to find that game at these garage sales, some Freudian BS was projecting itself into the ink blots. But given the events that happened afterward, I'm not so sure now. I should have asked the man about it. I wish I should have asked the man about it. After staring at the Majora-shaped blot, I looked up at the old man. Suddenly there he was again, arm's length in front of me, smiling at me. I'll admit I jumped out of reflex and laughed furiously as he handed me a Nintendo 64 cartridge. It was the standard gray color, except that someone had written Majora on the back black permanent marker. I got the butterflies in my stomach as I realized what a coincidence this was, and asked him how much he wanted for it. The old man smiled at me and told me that I could have it for free, that it used to belong to a kid who was about my age that didn't live here anymore. There was something weird about how the man phrased that, but I didn't really pay any attention to then. I was too caught up in not only finding this game, but getting it for free. I reminded myself to be a bit skeptical since this looks like a pretty shady cartridge, and there's no guarantee that it would work but then the optimist inside me interjected that maybe it could be some kind of beta version or pirated version of the game, and that all I needed to go back to Cloud 9. I think the man in the mountain smiled at me and wished me well, saying goodbye then. At least that's what it sounded like to me. All the way in the car ride home, I had a nagging doubt that the man had then said something else. My fears were confirmed when I booted up the game. To my surprise, it worked just fine. And there was one save file, simply Ben. Goodbye, Ben. He was saying goodbye, Ben. I felt bad for the man, obviously a grandparent, and obviously going senile, and I, for some reason or another, reminded him of his grandson Ben.
Out of my curiosity, I looked at the save file. Eyeballing it, I could tell that he was pretty far in the game. He had almost all of the 3 out of 4 remainings of the boss. Remainings? I noticed that he used an owl statue to save his game. He was on day 3 and by the Stone Tower Temple, which hardly an hour left before the moon would crash. I remember thinking that it was a shame that he had to come so close to beating the game, but he never finished it. I made a new file named Link out of the tradition and started the game, ready to relive my childhood. For such a shady-looking game cartridge, I was impressed at how smoothly it ran. Literally just like a retail copy of the game, save for a few minor hiccups here and there, like textures where they shouldn't be, random flashes, cutscenes at odd intervals, but nothing too bad. However, the only thing that was a little unnerving was that at times the NPCs would call me Link, and at other times they would call me Ben. I figured it was a bug, a fluke, in the programming causing our files to get mixed up or something. It did kind of creep me out after a while, and it was around after I'd beaten Woodfall Temple that I regrettably went into the save files and deleted Ben. I had intended to preserve the file out of respect for the game's original owner. It's not like I needed 2 files anyway. Hoping that would solve the problem. It did, and it didn't. Now NPCs wouldn't call me anything, where my name should be in the dialogue. There was just a blank space. My save file was still called Link though. Frustrated, and with homework to do, I put down the game for a day. I started playing the game again last night, getting the lens of truth and working my way towards completing the Snowhead Temple. Now some of you more hardcore Majora's Mask players know about the 4th day glitch. For those who don't know, you can Google it, but the gist of it is that right as the clock is about to hit 0 on the final day, you talk to the astronomer and look through the telescope. If you do it at the right time, the countdown disappears and you essentially have another day to finish what you were doing. Deciding to do the glitch to try it and finish the Snowhead Temple, I happened to get it right away, and on the first try and the time counter at the bottom disappeared. However, when I pressed B to exit the telescope out, instead greeted by astronomer, I found myself in the Majora boss fight room at the end of the game, the trippy boxed-in arena. Staring at Skull Kid hovering above me, there was no sound, just him floating in the air above me. And the background music, which was regular for the area, but still creepy. Immediately, my palms began to sweat. This was definitely not normal. Skull Kid never appeared here. I tried moving around the area, and no matter where I went, Skull Kid would always be facing me, looking at me. Not saying anything. Nothing would happen, though. And this kept up for around 60 seconds. I thought the game had bugged or something, but I was beginning to doubt that very much. I was about to reach for the reset button when a text appeared on my screen. You're not sure why, but you had apparently a reservation. I instantly recognized that text. You get that message when you get the room key from Anju at the end of Stockpot Inn. But why was it playing here? I refused to entertain the notion that it was almost as if the game was trying to communicate with me. I started to navigate the room again, testing some sort of trigger that enabled to interact with something here. I didn't realize how stupid I was. To even think that someone could reprogram the game like this was absurd. Sure enough, 15 seconds later, another message appeared on the screen, and again, like this was absurd. Pre-existing phase. Go to the lair of the temple's boss, yes or no? I paused for a second, contemplating what I should press, and how the game would react. When I realized that no, I couldn't select no. Taking a deep breath, I pressed yes, and the screen faded to white, with the words "Dawn of a New Day" and the subtext beneath it, where I was ported to, filled me with the most intense sense of dread and impending fear I had ever experienced. The only way I could describe the way I felt is having this feeling of inexplicable depression on a profound scale. I am not a normally depressed person, but the way I felt here was a feeling that I didn't even know existed. It was such a twisted, powerful presence that seemed to wash over me. I appeared in some kind of weird Twilight Zone version of Clocktown. I walked out of the clock tower as you normally do, start from day 1, only to find that all the inhabitants were gone. Usually the 4th day glitch, you can still find the guards and the dog that runs around the tower. This time they were all gone. What replaced them was that ominous feeling of there's something out there in the same area as me, and it was watching me. I had 4 hearts to my name and a hero's bow, but at this point I wasn't even considered for my avatar. I felt that personally I was in some kind of danger. Perhaps the most chilling thing was music. It was the song of healing, ripped straight from the game itself, but played in reverse. The music would get louder, building up